Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. As we're looking at the new developments in the ASE Medium Heavy Truck Test Series, as we go along, like Dave said, if you could keep your questions either electronically type them in or save them until the end. We'll try to answer all of them or as many as we can. So let's talk about the changes that are here. So we're going to go to the next slide and talk about the truck series, the background. So the truck series was started, again, there we go, thanks Dave, with the T1 gasoline engines test. You'll see that there's 50 scored questions. On the T2 diesel engines, there's 55. You guys can read through the rest of those and see what those are about. So what we're going to talk about this evening is the new Master Technician status requirements. There's been an update to that if you guys are not familiar with that. Starting January 1st of this year, the T8 certification test has been added to the Master Truck program. The reasoning behind that, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Pardon the interruption. It's Dave.
Sure.
If you wouldn't mind real quickly, on the slide that I still have showing up right now, we've got the T-Series background shown and we've got the various tests listed, and I'm not going to belabor everybody with reading through those, but we do have the number of scored questions and so on, and if you wouldn't mind, because our tests also contain some questions that are not scored, would you mind giving a little bit of the insight on that?
Thank you, Dave. I forgot to talk about that. So again, as Dave mentioned, as you look through the T1, the gasoline engines, we'll use as an example, there's 50 scored questions on that test. There will be an additional 10 questions added into the test mixed in with the questions that are scored. These questions are used for statistical data only. We basically are pre-testing these questions to verify they meet the content that we're looking for, that they score correctly, that to perform as we would like them to. So for instance, on the T1, the gasoline engines, 50 questions, you'll see a total of 60, but 50 questions will be scored towards your test score. So T2 is 55 questions, there'll be an additional 10 questions there, so it'll be a 65 question test. We get asked that all the time, can I at least know what those questions were? That's not something we can share with you guys. It is something that we mix into each of the tests on all the series, automobile, truck, school bus. It's basically our way of verifying these questions are the correct content and perform the way we'd like them to. So again, we were discussing the background on the truck series. The standard 2-year experience requirement is something that goes for all of our ASE tests. Basically, we require that you show us you have 2 years hands-on experience before you can get your certification. You can take your test anytime without having a 2 years experience, but your certification will not be active or won't be sent to you, or you won't be considered certified until you can prove your 2 years hands-on experience. Now, if I remember correctly, Dan, you can help me with this. I believe we just changed the platform or the way that we recognize it 2 years. I believe it's now an online form that you fill out. Is that correct?
Bob, that is correct. The work experience form is now available online. If you go to www.ase.com and then in the search box type in work experience, it will link you to the form that you fill out and then submit that electronically to ASE, and that's how we do it now. So a lot more convenient, easier to manage, a lot easier process, makes it less burdensome on you as a technician, as a test taker, to prove your work experience. And also when you're worried about work experience, wait until you've taken and passed the test before you submit the work experience so that we can tie it to your account to a past test, a test that you've been successful at. It's a lot easier for us on this side. So once you take your test, pass it, then fill out the work experience requirement at ase.com and then move forward. Thanks, Bob.
Great. Thank you, Dan. Appreciate the help. Okay, so as we talked about, 2 years experience, hands-on experience. Each test has, when you pass, comes with a 5-year credential. Recertification is required for each of the tests, T1 through T8. The Master Medium Heavy Truck Technician, at this point it stands that you need to have T2 diesel engines all the way up through T8 starting, again, January 1st of 2017. Now, with that being said, folks that are currently a master with their T2 through T7, that you will stay a master until one of your certifications expires. So let's say you have all of your T2 through T7, your T2 certification is getting ready to expire in June. When you recertify for T2 in June, you'll also need to take the additional T8 test to keep that master status. Okay, let's talk about the Master Medium Heavy Vehicle Technician. This is a designation that we came up with a few years ago to help folks who are transitioning. If you're a truck technician and you're transitioning to transit bus or school bus, as your truck certifications expire, you can then take that certification in your new discipline, whether it's transit bus, school bus. So as an example, you have here your diesel engines. Your H, where it says H2, that's transit bus, S2 is school bus, and T2 is trucks. So if your T2 certification is going to expire and you're transferring over to school bus, and you take your new test in school bus S2 diesel engines, so you'll have most of your certifications in truck, but you'll have a few that are school bus. We'll let you combine those, H2, S2, T2, in place of, so you can transition from one discipline to the next. So that goes for all of the series of medium-heavy trucks. So school bus, transit bus, and truck, you can use a combination of any of those as long as you have 2 through 7 to be able to keep your master status. Now, what will happen is, as you transition from one to the other, your truck master will supersede this medium-heavy vehicle designation, as will school bus or transit bus. So once you reach that goal of becoming a transit bus master technician, this Master Medium Heavy Vehicle Technician level certification will go away. It'll be superseded by your new master status. And then one other note, the T1 gasoline engines, it is not required for the Master Medium Heavy Truck Technician status. So again, for the medium heavy truck, it's T2 through T8 starting January of 2017. Dan, did I miss anything there? Can you fill in anything?
Bob, I just want to be very clear about the medium heavy vehicle technician master program. This is not a credential you can achieve if you're a master in school bus, transit bus, or medium heavy truck. This is a medium heavy vehicle master is designed for those that have components of each of those, but not a master in any. Is that a better way of stating it?
I like it that way also, Dan. Thanks for clarifying that. And if there's any questions about that, by all means, feel free to ask us more about it. I apologize if I didn't explain that well enough. Okay, so we're on to preparation pointers. We get asked that quite a bit. How do I prepare for the test? How do I, get ready to go sit down, especially the first-time test takers? So we're going to go over some test series details. We're going to look at the specifications and task list. We'll talk about content areas and tasks. There's some sample questions. We do have a link on our web page as far as test prep and training. Those are free at www.ase.com study guides. What we recommend is you go look at the study guide, the ASE study guide first. For instance, if you're going to go take your first test as T8, which is PMI, we really think it's helpful to go look at the task list first to see all the components that will be covered on the test. So we'll tell you in content area A, it covers so many questions in this area. So if you have an idea of what to expect when you go to take the test, you can kind of use this as a self-study guide and find out what you're comfortable with, what areas you're familiar with, and maybe some areas where you need to do a little bit more self-study to be prepared. So for instance, here's our test specifications on our diesel engines test T2. You'll see under content area A, general engine diagnosis, there are 11 questions on the test that cover the general engine diagnosis area. So as you flip through, it'll give you a breakdown of what exactly is covered in there. So B content is cylinder head valve train diagnosis and repair. We see there's 4 questions in the test about that. C, engine block diagnosis and repair, there's 5 questions and on down through the total. Engine brakes, we have 3 questions on that. So you can kind of, again, look at this and look at the areas that you're familiar with, that you're comfortable with, and the ones maybe you're not so familiar with, like for instance myself, fuel system diagnosis and repair. So a lot of questions there, 16, because that's where a lot of the work is being done. So really spend some time in that area if you need a little bit more time, a little more study on that topic. So these are the test specs again for the T2. The number of questions, the percentage it reflects of the test. And again, remember that with that 55 total numbers of questions on this test, there'll be an additional 10 questions that are pre-test questions, trial questions that will be mixed in with that group as well. Okay, so the importance of the content areas. In the E content on the T2, which is the air induction and exhaust system diagnosis and repair, there's 6 questions there. So if you look at the E1, inspect and service, replace air induction piping, test 2. So if you look through these, again, become familiar with what's there. Task 2, inspect, test, replace turbochargers, including variable ratio geometry, VGT, pneumatic hydraulic. So if you look through these and become familiar, when you go to take the test, you'll at least have a better feel of what you're going to experience when you sit down for the test. So under task 5, we talk about the exhaust systems, and you'll note that there is some new stuff in there, the exhaust aftertreatment devices, through-way catalyst, oxidation catalyst, diesel particulate filters. So there is some newer technology here that we hear from some guys that they don't have it on their fleets yet, they don't get the experience, they don't get to see it. So that's kind of where you need to go out on your own and do a little bit of research and do some study on that kind of stuff, again, before you sit down for the test to be comfortable with what you're going to see. Okay, interactive test-taking tips. On our website, we have some links, tips for ASE test-taking. The idea here is to let you test drive some ASE-style questions so you can better prepare for what's going to be seen on the test. They're basically just 6 questions, multiple choice review, offers helpful tips as you go through the questions. There is no time limit. Don't worry if you don't know the technical data behind any of the questions. Nobody's keeping score. The main focus here is to learn how to read and evaluate an ASE-style question so you can demonstrate the knowledge you have when you take the real ASE tests. One thing we'll share with you folks is that these questions are written and created by folks from the industry, just like yourselves, who work on these things on a regular basis. So we have real hands-on technicians, trainers, industry support who will come in and they actually write the test questions. So they also review them to make sure the technical data is correct, that everything there is real and prevalent, that it is something that's being seen in the industry and in the shops. So we get asked all the time, who writes these daggone questions? And it's really the industry that's writing the questions and verifying that they're good content and they do meet the specifications that we have.
Bob, this is Dave. I'm just going to throw something in real quick, is that test preparation goes far beyond just content itself that you've outlined and how that's broken down in the framework for the test. The purpose of this tips for ASE test taking, again, is to familiarize yourself with the different types of ASE questions. One of the ones that often gets misconstrued as far as how they're supposed to be interpreted interpreted as the Tech A, Tech Bs, many techs think that it's an argument that one is supposed to prevail over the other, and that isn't the case. They're independent statements. And I encourage you to take a look at this tool again, and you can kind of see how it, again, teaches you to evaluate the questions, because it's a real important part of taking an ASE test. Thanks, Bob.
Great, Dave. Thank you for the heads up. I appreciate the input there. We do also have some links on our website to kind of walk you through and give you the experience of what you're going to see when you get to the test center as well. For our folks who haven't done the computer-based testing yet, when you go in, you do go through sometimes through a metal detector. You have to pull stuff out of your pockets, things like that. It's like going through security at an airport. So that's something you need to kind of prepare yourself for. You can't walk in with your phone and keys and stuff to have you put that stuff in a locker. So again, by all means, look at our website, and we'll walk you through the process of what to expect when you get there, so you're not surprised or caught off guard by that. Okay, new and exciting thing we have here is we have just launched some brand new truck series of practice tests. Dan, do you want to jump in and give us some feedback on that one, sir?
Sure. The ASE practice test, or official practice test product, is available at information is available at ase.com/practice. This product started in 2009 with the automobile series and has migrated through. We now have C1, the service consultant test, G1, auto maintenance and light repair test, and then we also have the L1 advanced auto engine performance specialist test. This January, just a few days ago, we launched with industry support 4 new exams. They're half-length of the actual test. They have answer explanations in them, and they support the T2 diesel engines exam, the T4 brakes exam, the T6 electrical electronic systems test, as well as the T8 PMI test. Now, there's more to come. They'll be launch sometime this year. We're working on them and have been for quite some time. There's a quantity discount, but a basic price for just one test is $14.95. The test, if you use these, you need to be aware of how they function. So read the frequently asked questions page about the tests. But they are tests that you can use in two ways. You can go through the entire exam, answer all the questions, and then submit your responses for scoring, and it'll give you a score report just as you would get at the test center, and you can make your decisions on what areas you're lacking and where you should go study. Or you can go through, review all the items, or answer all the questions, and then have somebody else review and score it for you. Because once you submit for scoring on these tests, it leaves the answer explanations open, and you can't change your answer selection. So it's a one and done. Okay. Only way we could make this thing function for you folks, so that you could know what you're doing, use it as a barometer test, or use it as a test over and over and over again. So thanks, Bob.
Great, thank you, Dan. I appreciate the help, sir. Okay, we're going to talk about Section 609 update. One thing that we're going to let Dave Kappert hop in here and discuss with us. Some misconceptions in the industry. We have our truck T7, which is the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning test, and Dave's going to give us some explanation how that and the refrigerant recovery and recycling 609 program, and give us some information on that. Dave?
Thank you, Bob. Yeah, as Bob mentioned, one of the things that we field calls on probably at least once a week is there is confusion in the industry that if you've passed the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning exam, T7 is the ASE certification exam, that it would equal a Section 609 and would cover you under the federal law in terms of a Section 609 requirement, and that is not the case. And I'd hate to see people potentially end up, having their facility fined for not having proper credentials. And it is something that the EPA does check on, and it's something that everybody should have that services motor vehicle air conditioning systems. So I can't advocate that enough. And that's also true beyond T7. Any of the 7 exams, the designator, alpha designator 7, so it's A7 and our auto series, any of them, The same rule applies. None of those cover Section 609 requirements. Even though they might have some basic information on refrigerant recovery, the emphasis of our refrigerant recovery and recycling program is on refrigerant management practices and safety and those sorts of things, which specifically deals with those according to federal guidelines. So it's easy to take it. You can take it in the, you see a picture on your screen of the paper booklet, but we also have an online version. The URL is coming up on a resources page, so you'll be able to go take it if you need to. But again, I can't stress it enough. It's such a simple thing to overlook, and it's such an easy thing to get taken care of. So please be aware of that. And as a footnote to that, it's important to know, because I know we're dealing with a wide audience here of different types of vehicles that you might be working on. But in the federal eye, you know, an over-the-road truck, you know, such as you see on the left-hand side there, as long as that air conditioning system cools, you know, the inside of the cab, you know, it's got a engine-driven compressor, or even off-road vehicles like the tractor or the construction truck you see, those can be what's called an MVAC-like appliance in the federal guidelines. So you can use a 609 program and not a more stringent 608 like you would need to use on a refrigerated trailer or some of the other equipment shown. So again, you know, trucks, it's fine to use a 609 program, but anything else like that might have a hermetically sealed compressor in it, that is not going to be a 609 application. So that's where the split is. All right, Bob, I guess we're ready to take some questions from the audience and see where we go from here.
Okay.
Let's take a peek at this one. One of our attendees asked if we could comment to how many questions are in the item pools here for the test, and specifically let's talk about the truck test and what the average or the range of question pool size is for your exams. Are you similar to the auto series where you're running between 300 and 600 questions per test series, or pardon me, per test title?
That's pretty close to being correct, Dan. Some of my tests, for instance, the T4 is a very popular test, the brakes test. I believe I've got somewhere just a bit above 500 to 600 questions in that test pool questions. So every time we build the test, we're using a new set of questions, but I've got a really healthy pool of questions set up for that. The T2 diesel engine's a good, solid test pool. T8, PMI, same thing. So I've got, most of my pools are very, very thick, and I've got quite a few questions that perform really well. We do update them every so often. So I would say, for instance, we'll use T2 as an example. Every 2 years, we'll bring a group of folks in and we'll review questions that we currently have. We'll write some new questions. As the technology changes, we'll have, you know, new material that we want to get in there and be testing you guys on. So we're constantly building the pool, adding more stuff to the pool, and at the same time, as the questions get older and get dated, those questions will be retired and pulled out and put aside and not used any longer. Where'd you like to go next, Mr. Dan?
Can you talk about the patches that are available for the different series for these exams, for specifically for truck and the other medium heavy?
I'm not sure I understand the patches you mean for the certified patches for...
Yeah, what are the differences available for those folks that are working on, for instance, in the medium heavy vehicle master, okay? There are 3 different test series that are involved. Are there different patches for the 3 different test series, truck, school bus, transit bus?
There is actually. I'm sorry, now I see what you're getting at, sir. Yes, there are different patches for those. So we have the medium heavy truck technician. If you pass at least one certification test, then as you become a master, you get a different with a gold emblazed emblem on your patch for master medium heavy truck technician master. It's a different one for transit bus and a different one for school bus. Same thing, as you pass one of your certification tests, you'll get the certified technician for transit bus or school bus or truck, and as you work your way up and become master, there's an additional patches for those as well. And there is also an additional patch for the L2. I see one of our questions on the board here was asking about if we'll have a practice test for the L2. That is probably going to be something we'll discuss and get into. I don't believe that will be completed this year in 2017, but it is probably something we'll be hopefully getting going by next year sometime.
Okay, Bob, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to both Dan and Bob. I'm just going to jump in here real quick. Somebody asked a question, and this is one I know it speaks for many people. People say, I've got a 609 credential. Do I need to recertify 609 because of the new quote-unquote Freon? Well, first of all, I just want to say this Section 609 credential really, at this point, at this very moment in time, does not require by federal law that you update it. However, I encourage anybody that has taken a program prior to the introduction of R1234YF, R744, and R152. Those are the three main new refrigerants that are covered in our new program. If you've taken the program some time ago, do it as a service to your customers, your employer, and yourself to take the newer program, because there's a lot of new material in there that makes it worthwhile for you to be up on it. So, the one attitude might be is, yeah, I can skirt by and just use my old one, but boy, there's been a lot that's changed and you need to be aware of it, and there's a lot more coming. So I think it'll help bring you up to speed.
The other thing, too, jumping back to the practice test, that is an online program, okay, that's available. And they are in the T3, with the odd numbers, T3, 5, 7, and the T1, which is not required for medium heavy vehicle master. Those practice tests will launch sometime this year. We don't know when, but it'll be sometime this year. Bob, I'd like to jump into on work experience requirement. Again, for the medium heavy truck T-Series test, there's a 2-year work experience requirement. There is also an equivalency that you can use, you can use educational experience at post-secondary schools towards the work experience requirement. Usually it's 2 to 1, but there's information available at the website if you go to ase.com and search for, help me out there, Bob.
I'm sorry, Dan, for the...
I was reading questions trying to keep up and I lost my spot.
I understand. I was doing the same thing, sir.
Yeah.
Let me jump in here real quick once. I want to just clarify something. There's been some questions, I've seen it from maybe a couple people that have asked and said, well, how come HVAC certification doesn't include 609 and combine it into it? Well, these are different types of exams altogether. So any of the ASE HVAC certifications, T7, A7, whichever one you want to call it, it's a diagnostic and repair test for those systems. Yes, it does touch a little bit on refrigerant management, but if we were to put all of the refrigerant management content into it, it would then get in the way of the regular diagnostic and repair part for HVAC. So they do need to be separate animals. And then on top of it, I mean, if you look at our 609 program, we have 30 questions on that deal specifically with refrigerant management and health and safety issues, and that's by federal guidelines. Plus, they want the program to be educational in nature, so it's a workbook study program, which is different than what certification is. So they're kind of different animals, so that's why we approach it the way we do. And actually, we don't have a lot of choice in how we approach it, because everything we do has to meet EPA requirements and pass muster with them before we can offer it to the industry.
Great comments, Dave. Thank you. And Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe you and I have shared some information back and forth that as we move forward towards a new refrigerant, that there may be requirements to be able to purchase the R1234YF to be able to have to show that certification again, like we had to do in the old days with the R12. Is that correct?
Yeah, Bob, that's a real good point. That's something new that was in a proposed rule from EPA, and that has now been ratified in the law that going in the beginning of 2018, there is then going to be a sales restriction on large cylinders of R1234YF. So it's going to be just like when you were buying R12 Freon in the past. So it's going to put that much more emphasis on, you know, having a 609 credential. There is going to be a loophole. The exclusion is cylinders 2 pounds or less that have a self-sealing valve on them. But, you know, anybody that's running a recovery recycling machine, you know, you're going to need to get the big cylinder of it. So 12 or 134A is not going to be going away anytime soon. So we don't know at what point it may switch over in trucks from 134 to something different. Right now, the new thing that's being used in most of the production vehicles in the US at least is R1234YF. But right now, that has not been approved yet as a refrigerant for heavy-duty vehicles.
Great, thank you, Dave. I appreciate that.
Bob, one of the attendees is asking how to prepare for the recertification test, and it's just asking if it's the same way that like the first time. And I'd like to jump in there if I can. It is the recertification test. Preparation for that is very similar to the first time you took your test. You have to consider every time you recertify, you're 5 years further down your career path in general. So you're going to be that much further along with your knowledge, skills, and abilities. And that also assumes that you're continuing on with your education, moving forward, attending seminars, taking in-service training as available. That's very important as part of that process. When you recertify, because you're much further along in your career, it's usually a fairly more easy test. And you look at it and go, oh, this test is easy. If it's easy, that means that you are moving forward and continuing to move the needle, the barometer, and this barometer test, so to speak, this bar exam is telling you that. Yes, it's easy for you because you're continuing to move forward in your education, your skills, and ability. So study the same way you did before. Keep in mind that when you take the exam, if you're doing all those tasks in that task list, it should be second nature for you. It should be fairly easy to take the test. If you have hurdles, and I think Bob will agree with this, common hurdles for technicians that take the ASE tests, mechanical side, if you're having an issue, take some time, step back, and study electrical content. How voltage drop, dynamic voltage drop measured across a switch or a ground through circuits, that's very important on the auto series. It's just as important on the regular tests. And if you're looking for study guides, keep in mind that the study guide really is the ASE one that we produce that has just information about those tasks that you need to be familiar with. That's the study guide. And the reason we say that is that there are no questions. You have to, in order for a question to be on an exam or test, it has to be a question that fits one of the tasks in the task list. So if you're familiar with charging system testing and the symptoms of failed charging systems and how to test them properly, then that particular task you should do well on the exam. If you're one of the test areas might be EGR, and so understanding EGR and the problems in testing and common failure items and symptoms of failed EGR, if you're familiar with that, well, you can check that one off. Okay, I've got that. And that's how that study guide really works well for you.
Great points, Dan. Thank you very much. If I can, there's a question on here. Somebody's asking, can you only have one master certification? No, you can have multiple masters. You can have school bus, automobile, truck, transit, so that you can have as many of the masters as you want. What we discussed earlier was the transitional master to go from one series to another, from transit to truck or to school bus. But yes, you may have multiple master certifications, and we do see that quite a bit. There was another question, if someone is T1 through T8 master already, will this new T8 edition affect them at all in 2018? No, it will not. You're already ahead of the curve. You've already got it. We do have some fleets for them to be certified master with that fleet. They have to have all the certifications, T1 through T8. So if you've already got them all, this new setup, the new edition of T8 will have zero effect on you at all. So you're already ahead of the curve. Another question was 2-year diesel tech high school programs. It's still considered 2 years of hands-on experience. Actually, 2 years of diesel tech high school will count as 1 year hands-on experience. So as Dan said, the 2 to 1. So 2 years of school will count towards 1 year of considered hands-on experience.
And the ASE website has, that's where we were going before for experience. If you go on there and as part of the work experience search for the form, we also have a chart available, and you can find that by hitting the search button at ase.com. And it explains some of the intricacies of the work experience requirement. You can get a better understanding. This webinar is not about that, but there is plenty of information on the ASE website for that. And one thing to consider is that this webinar that we're doing today and all the webinars we've done in the past are available at YouTube at the ASE campus, and we answer many of the questions that you're asking in the panes right now. We answer those in those other webinars, so you can find those there. You can also contact us emails. That's fine too. Now, as for work experience too, cross-pollinating. We don't cross-pollinate from automotive to truck. We don't cross-pollinate aviation to truck. You need experience in the industry. That's part of the requirement. These tests, this credentialing program is built by industry for industry. So industry comes to AST and says, we need a test. Together, we work to determine if there are needs in industry, and then we come up with a job study, and part of that job study then is this task list, which is really a job description for the technician that's seeking that credential, and then it moves forward from there. So keep that in mind. These are industry-driven tests. Part of that then of the industry requirement is that you have work experience in those particular fields. So thank you.
Dan and Bob, this is Dave again. I'm just going to pop in here real quickly. We are getting a fair number of questions on the whole ASE service issue from a number of different people coming from different angles, and some of it stems around when is 1234 going to come into trucks. The answer to that is nobody really knows right now because it hasn't been legally cleared by EPA. I'll just add a note to that by saying that we plan on having a webinar. It looks like right now it's going to be in March. We may move it a little bit. I don't know. I'm thinking it's going to be March right now. We're going to have an update on regulations and what's happening in the industry. So you may want to loosely put that on your calendar, but if you're already on our list of getting notified for these events, you'll be getting notified of it, and we'd love that you would attend. Thanks.
And Dave, will you share with the folks, there's questions here that we have not gotten a chance to get to yet. We will spend the next couple days replying to these and giving you answers to those. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's a very good point, Bob. We try to go through the patterns of these questions as they come in, and we thank everybody for for asking them. And what we'll do is we'll go through that log and we'll kind of take a look at that and see if we can follow up with you on those that we didn't follow up with during the session. And what I was going to do real quick once is see what we've got in terms of any other questions that may have come in a different way.
Okay.
Yeah, and while we were doing that, Dave, I'd like to say that one thing that you need to consider is if you're asking specific questions to the T-Series test, like testing time, and then what's on the test and what that study guide is about, again, you can get that at the ASE website and then go from there. So, and it says right in the book what the testing times are, so a lot of the stuff that we talked about is right in there.
Yeah, I've got one audio question I'm going to make an attempt to take here once, and I'm going to go to Jose. Jose T, if you are ready and you have a question for us by audio, I'm going to go ahead and unmute your mic. You want to give it a shot? Over to you, Jose. Jose, your mic is unmuted. All right. Maybe Jose didn't hear me or has moved on to other things. I'm going to go ahead and put his hand down. So that about clears that out. I think at this point we should probably go ahead and wrap this session up. We thank everybody for attending. We thank everybody for their questions, participation, and so on and so forth. And thanks again for attending this ASE webinar. On behalf of Dan Baumhart and Bob Cornwell, I'm Dave Kappert, and we'll see you at another ASE webinar soon. Thanks, everyone. and good night.